Strive, Seek, Find podcast with me, Tom Heaton. This is the book summary of Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. In this book, Duckworth looks to explore one of the key components of what makes someone successful. She calls this grit. To explore what this is, she outlines how there are some particular situations, often those of great challenge, where some people will succeed and others won't. She uses the example of the tough military training camp. Interestingly, this is not only affected by the ability of participants, as might first be expected. While this had a predictive role in some cases, it was not the case in all. Her research has been able to identify the trait of grit, which is a key factor in which people will actually succeed in these tough environments. She defines this as a combination of passion and perseverance. A good way to think about it are the following equations. Talent multiplied by effort equals skill, and skill multiplied by effort equals achievement. As you all know, effort counts twice, even though talent is still included. She defines talent as the rate at which a person learns with effort. As such, it is a relevant factor, but far from the full picture. Training grit. Importantly, grit isn't all innate. As with many psychological traits, there is a polygenic component and an environmental component. A practical question is therefore how we could impact on this environmental component. How can we train grit? An interesting observation she has made is that people get grittier over time. This could be part generational and thus affected by the prevailing culture, but also part maturity, affected by the individual's specific life events. This second component seems better understood, as it is easier to study in the short-term setting, which is a feature of most research programs. Life events provide lessons that allow people to mature, and this allows some of the components for grit to develop. A key factor within this is having a guiding compass. She describes different levels of goals, top, medium and lower. In gritty people, they have determined their top level goals and are dedicated to them. Whilst the other levels may change, as is not unreasonable, top level goals do not. Duckworth breaks this down further to look at some common traits of gritty people. These are passion, practice, purpose and hope. Passion is an essential starting point, and it's to be engaged in something that you find interesting. If not, you won't be able to maintain the energy and drive for it. However, there is also scope to develop an interest over time, rather than just going with what your current flavour is. She has simple advice for people on this, and an initial tip is simply to explore. Spending time doing this investigation of topics will allow an appreciation of what fits your innate interests. A tip for parents here is that this should be fun. They should be play to start with rather than work, as this is what will create the interest. There is no escaping the truth that practice leads to expertise. This is well established, but the evidence points that it goes beyond just the time put in. The concept here is that of deliberate practice. That is, the practice must be conducted in a way that makes it specifically directed at the development of said skill. The main problem with effective deliberate practice is that it is hard work. Key features include spending time in the discomfort zone, having a clear goal, and utilising feedback. This is well articulated by K. Anders Ericsson in his work, and Peak is another great book that we shall look at here. A contrast with this is the concept of flow. This is the observation that expert practitioners who are at their peak performance often practice without effort, and indeed without a great awareness of many external factors, such as time passing. This state has been described as a flow state. It does seem that this is a state reached by expert practitioners, but it's often when they are acting from a base of expertise, as opposed to when they are building that experience. Creating that expertise is still often the tough journey of deliberate practice. Whilst many start with passion, another driving force, which may indeed take a greater role through time, is purpose. People will find that develop a greater awareness of their purpose as they grow personally. This purpose usually relates to something that would be deemed of a socially moral nature. This is probably built into our psychology as social animals, i.e., it is something that's been naturally selected for through our evolution. However, this doesn't completely offset the importance of personal directed goals. Indeed, it seems that when both are drivers in an individual, they can be even more effective. As with interest though, this is something that can be cultivated. Most jobs can be adapted in ways that create a sense of purpose. It does require effort though, and some scenarios will clearly be easier than others. The final component of note is hope. This is a common feature of gritty people. Two aspects of this that she looks at relate to the growth mindset work of Carol Dweck and Seligman's work on learned helplessness and learned optimism. With a growth mindset, people believe that they can change from what they are. This goes back to the concept of outcomes being less dependent on talent than one might think. Actively approaching this mindset is therefore helpful, as it hands a huge amount of agency to the individual. In addition, this links well with the idea of learned optimism. The idea centres on the role of control. We can have an impact on the outcome. Again, this fits in well with Duckworth's initial equation, and how effort is the factor that has the highest impact. I find it also fits well alongside many of the Stoic teachings that have greatly influenced me, highlighting the importance and impactfulness of recognising how much control we have. Raising gritty children. Duckworth moves on to try and give us some useful guidance on how this may apply to parents. An analysis of parenting styles unveils some key messages. The wise parenting style, also termed authoritative, is clearly the best. This is essentially high on both the loving and demanding axes, which can be thought of as the two important domains of our attitudes to our children. This should be considered when we think about our overall approach. Importantly, children model our behaviour, so we need to ensure that we model grit for them. This will ideally lead them to emulate us, not just copy us, and build the traits that lead to grit. This also seems to apply to other cases where we are in a semi-parental role, such as teaching. This is something that we should look for in those who will help us develop our children, as well as try to provide to others when we are in the role. Another well-recognised boost for grit is an extracurricular activity. This challenges children by pushing development in an area that is usually in the suitably challenging zone. The mentor here will also be a non-parent who can hopefully add another demanding yet supported driver. Importantly, this activity has to be persevered with, at least a year and ideally more. This stops the easy quit when it gets a little bit difficult, although there can be negotiated finishes when there has been a suitable trial. Duckworth herself has a hard thing rule in their house. Everyone has to do a hard thing. It is their choice, but they have to do it in a dedicated fashion for at least the duration of commitment, such as a year. In summary, grit is a major contributing trait to being successful at something. Indeed, it is probably the most important factor in succeeding with hard things, as effort counts more than talent in many outcomes. Whilst the genetic starting point is certainly relevant, grit can very much be developed. Keep in mind the key domains of passion, practice, purpose and hope, and this can help you develop more grit. Thank you for listening. To keep up to date with future podcasts and to follow my writing, subscribe at Substack, which is striveseekfind.substack.com, or follow me on X at @tostriveseekfind.